have something to do, have someone to love, have something to look forward to, and have something to give back. I think those are the four legs of a successful life right there. Those four things cover pretty much a human happiness.
Welcome to the Midlife Chrysalis podcast with Chip Conley, where we explore how midlife isn't a crisis, but a chrysalis, a time of profound transformation that can lead to the most meaningful chapter of your life.
Welcome to the Midlife Chrysalis, and I'm excited to go into the cocoon with my friend Dan Buettner on this episode. Dan is somebody I've known for the last 3 or 4 years, but we've become pretty close friends along the way. He's been an MEA faculty member. He's most well known for discovering the blue zones and popularizing that idea, which led to the Emmy award-winning Netflix series. He has many, many books on this subject. He talks a little bit here about the things you normally would hear from Dan about what is blue zones and what are the Power 9 variables that are most common amongst centenarians. But we also got a little personal with him in this episode. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by getting to know underneath the surface who Dan Buettner is. How are you enjoying the podcast world? You haven't gone live yet, but you're going live soon, I think.
Well, after interviewing Chip Conley, it's really, just about anybody after that is kind of dull and boring. No, but seriously, it's I've been loving it. I didn't think I would love it, but I do, because I think it's sort of ongoing adult education. And over the years, I have made so many extraordinary friends that now I have a chance to talk to them in a sort of public forum. I've really been loving it. We launch in August, like mid-August or something like that. But as you know, kind of the name of the game is you want to have about 20 interviews in place, and then you release them with some regularity so people can count on them. And that's what I'm doing. I'll put you know, I thought of, Chip looks pretty good with that scruffy
I was
beard.
going
I'll
to
try that
say,
for a
look at
while.
you. Look at you. For those who are not doing this on video right now, Dan's looking a little bit like a hippie.
I was in the Boundary Waters last week, so I came out of the woods looking like this, and figured I'd keep it for a while. The savage look.
So Dan, we have so much to talk about. We've got only an hour. Let's dive in. What do we get wrong about aging when it comes to the societal perspective in the United States? And then what can you get right about aging personally? So let's talk about societally in the US, and then personally. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Several subtle forces that make us fear aging. Social Security is going to go bankrupt. Our economy can't help it. Old workers aren't as agile. Old workers can't keep up with technology. We live in a society that celebrates youth and beauty. All you have to do is page through a magazine, or other than AARP, or look at a commercials on TV, other than, the Flomax commercials. And they almost all are young, beautiful people. And all advertising is geared to that. So that's sort of, it's put into our head that maintaining youth is somehow virtuous and leads to a better life. And what we found in blue zones, that actually the older you get, the more celebrated you are. In Okinawa, the place that's produced the longest lived humans in the history of the world, the biggest day of your life is your 97th birthday. It has to do with Lunar New Year, but the whole village comes out. It's bigger than your wedding. It's bigger than anything else. Young people touch old people, and they believe it is like a blessing, a sign of power. That's not only in Okinawa, but we see it in Sardinia too. So where we get it wrong here is, instead of embracing age, we fear it. And you frequently quote, I think it's Becca Levy, and her research showing that a positive attitude towards aging lowers your overall mortality by something like 40%. That goes along perfectly with what we see in blue zone. The final point I'll make here is happiness is a U-shaped curve. We tend to be quite happy in our 20s and optimistic, and we're going to marry the perfect person and become president someday. And by about 50, you're disabused of both notions. And that's typically the toughest year in America, somewhere between 45 and 55. And then as long as you keep your health, your happiness actually increases. And the cohort that's the happiest are the people over 100. So we get wrong what we fear aging, and the reality is that the best years lie ahead of us.
So let's rewind and talk about how you became Mr. Blue Zones, how you lived your life. You know, the fact that you rode your bike all the way from Alaska down to del Fuego, I think. So I want to understand how Dan Buettner became the Dan Buettner.
I'm not, and I don't think I even know that. But
Little Danny Buettner, look at what you've done.
well, honestly, I've had a lot of luck, right? And I mean, people under celebrate the family they were born into. I was lucky to be born into a family with an adventuresome father and a loving mother, and not everybody gets that head start in life. So I don't pretend to think I've done it all on my own, but I have had a very healthy curiosity, which has driven me to do, rather, I would say, unusual things. So I hold the record for biking from Alaska to Argentina. I hold the record for biking around the world, and I also hold the record for biking the length and width of Africa. So it's 5 continents, and we did them pretty fast. But I've always dreamt of being on writing for National Geographic, and I have a great editor there named Peter Miller. He said, expeditions of the future, they have to add to the body of knowledge, and that has driven me for the past 30 years. So I've led about 17 expeditions, and they all have been with scientists to, if not illuminate the human experience, at least bring back actionable ideas on how to either live longer or happier. And that's the basis of Blue Zone. It's all evidence based. And it, instead of looking to technology as the big answer for making our life easier or better or longer, longevity hack and that sort of thing, I've simply relied on traditional peoples who've manifestly achieved the outcomes we want. They live about 10 years longer at our age, by the way. Life expectancy at age 60 is about 10 years greater in blue zones. And they live largely free of the chronic diseases that are tanking our economy and making life miserable for 70% of Americans.
So let's talk about what you learned. So the Blue Zones this came out maybe 20 years ago. When did Blue Zones first come out?
The cover story in National Geographic was almost exactly 20 years ago, 19 years and change.
So you found that there were 5 places in the world that had a disproportionately large number of centenarians. Those places being Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy,
Or Ikaria,
Ikaria, Greece, Costa Rica, then what's it called
Nicoya,
again? Nicoya,
Nicoya,
and then Loma Linda, California.
among
And
the
you found
Adventists.
that there were 9 particular the power 9 particular variables that were most common amongst the people in those places. Do you mind going through those briefly? And then I want to know, which of those do you think you do best, and which of those do you do worst?
So the 9 in general, so many people look for extending their lives or and reversing their aging in a pill or a supplement or a superfood or some, running down to Central America for stem cells. None of that works. The anti-aging industry has failed to produce even one evidence-based intervention that's been shown to reverse, stop, or even slow aging. It's a good way to waste your money and experiment on your own body.
So are you saying you will not have Brian Johnson in Venice Beach on your podcast?
No, yeah, actually, I like him. You know, I mean, we have similar, I would say, temperaments in that he is on fire to look for the secret of longevity in his own body. And I'm on fire to find the secret of longevity among populations who've achieved the outcomes we want. I don't think he's a bad guy. I haven't met him yet, but I don't have anything bad to say about him. I worry that he's going to accidentally do something to his body that's going to kill him. But what I really, it's an $83 billion anti-aging industry, and they're really kind of anti-MEA too, because they're all looking for the quick fix to beauty, and it's just not forthcoming. In blue zones, let's start with diet. So if you're, middle age and you can move from a standard American diet, which is about 60% processed, to a mostly blue zone diet, which is about 90% whole plant-based food. You can have some meat in there, some eggs, some cheese, a little bit of that, but mostly whole food plant-based. It's worth about 7 to 8 years of life expectancy at middle age. I don't know of anything, any serum or any diet or any exercise program that will give you 7 or 8 years. Move to a whole plant-based diet. That's a meta-analysis that followed about 8 million people for 20 years. I mean, the data is really strong on that. So that's number one, mostly a whole food plant-based diet. Beans, grains, nuts, greens, and tubers, sweet potatoes, and a couple beans a day. Number two, know your sense of purpose. We know that people who wake up and they understand what they're doing today, what their place in life, what their responsibilities are to some other people besides themselves, that's worth about 8 years of life expectancy. Having daily rituals to help slow down, saying prayers, taking a nap, having happy hour with friends. The Okinawans have ancestor veneration. We know that the human condition is full of hurry and worry and angst, and having strategies to reverse that, like we see in blue zones, right? Those are worth a few years of life expectancy. When it comes to exercise, there's some big revelations since then. Chip, you and I grew up in a time where we were basically told running marathons and pumping iron is the best thing for our health. And, we're going to muscle up and we're going to find some sexy partner. But now it shows that chronic long distance running actually raises your cardiovascular mortality. You're more likely to die of a heart attack if you've been running marathons your whole life. And even more importantly, your joints, life expectancy for the human species for 99% of our existence is only about 31 years. So if you're 50 or 60 and pounding your joints running marathons, that's a big mistake. It's pretty soon you're going to develop knee, hip, or ankle issues, and then you're not even going to walk. Best exercise is moving naturally. Having a garden nudges us out to weed or move. Living in a walkable place. Yes, we should do some weight bearing exercise, but for most Americans, and the 75% of whom do not even get 20 minutes of exercise a day, I would love to just see people walking to go get their cup of coffee in the morning, or their kids walking to school, or moving closer to work. That works. Why does it work? Because we can do it every day. We can do it every day in our life. Going from a sedentary, in other words, as a couch potato, to just 20 minutes of physical activity a day, i.e., walking to get your coffee and back, adds 3 years to your life expectancy. Tell me any supplement or bullshit superfood that's going to give you 3 years of life expectancy. Get up and go walk to get your own cup of coffee.
You got a 9 year, you got an 8 year, you got a 2 year, I mean, these do not stack on top of each other,
No,
right?
no,
If you
no.
do,
They're
okay,
concurrent. It's like doing
okay,
concurrent
okay.
sentences in prison. They overlap. And by the way, what I quote are correlations. So I talk about a population that doesn't do these things and the population that does do. The value proposition here, honestly, realistically, if you do everything right and you start young enough, 20s or 30s or maybe 40s, you can probably live about 15 extra years over the average American. And by the way, those years would be good. The reason you're living those 15 extra years is because you're not suffering from type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, or cardiovascular disease, or one of the 45% of cancers that are avoidable. So blue zones isn't about some, bullshit, you're going to live to 120. Blue zones is about getting all the years your body is engineered to give you. And for men, that's about 94 years. So if you do everything right, you should be able to hit 94. Men are only hitting about 74 right now. And women should hit 96. And women are only hitting about 79 or about 80 right now. So the value proposition is a good 15 years. And for a lot of us, that's worth it. By the way, the blue zone approach is joyous. I'm talking to those Power Nine, having a sense of purpose, connecting with people who you like and who nudge you to be physically active and to to eat right, having a couple glasses of wine a day. That's fine in the Blue Zone program. We know people in Blue Zones are drinking wine almost every day of their lives, mostly moderately. Every once in a while, they go kind of berserk. But it doesn't seem to be taking life away from them, as the longevity bros will tell you. Having a faith, showing up to a faith based community. Again, people who go to church or temple or mosque every week tend to live 4 years longer than their counterparts who are identical in every other respect and don't go to church, temple, or mosque. So, mostly what I'm talking about is how do you stack the deck in favor of an extra 15 years?
Which of those do you do really well, and which ones do you not do so well at?
Well, let me just start. You won't see me in church as much as my mother wishes she would.
Yeah, yeah.
I get there
I thought
maybe,
that was gonna be ninth place on your list. Yes.
yeah, I probably get to church maybe 3 times a year at predictable dates, but I'm pretty good about the wine at 5. I'm a big happy hour.
Yeah, so let's explore that one for a moment because there are a lot of people who say like, "I love Blue Zones. I trust in Dan." But that one, that's the one that a lot of people are trying to debunk. They're saying like, "Nope, nope, nope. That's the Seventh-day Adventists don't drink and the Japanese don't drink all that much. And yes, the Sardinians do. And so I don't know. Tell me more based upon the last 5 years, because it does feel as if we have been barraged with medical reports lately saying, frankly, no alcohol is the best solution.
So a few things to remember about that. The studies follow alcohol consumption, and they lump organic wine with Harvey Wallbanger's Cosmopolitan and rum and coke. So I'm not here pitching mixed cocktails. I am telling you though that people in blue zones who are manifestly living a decade longer than us, they're drinking a glass or two of mostly homemade wine. By the way, people in Okinawa drink their share of sake and this hard liquor called amawari, which is a rice liquor. Well, I wouldn't say big drinkers. I'll tell you, they drink their share. And the Adventists don't want me to reveal this, I'm sure, but about 50% of Adventists drink, even though their public stance is they don't. But let's get to the numbers here. So it turns out that drinkers do have slightly elevated cancer mortality. Breast cancer is a little bit higher, but it's tiny. It's 18% more likely. So if your chance of getting breast cancer are 1 out of 200, for a moderate drinker, the chances are 18% higher, which would be, one out of 170 or something like that. I mean, it just doesn't make that big a difference. What people don't tell you, and this is according to the National Academy of Science, not known for their hyperbole, they'll tell you that overall mortality of moderate drinkers is about 10% lower. Overall mortality of drinkers, moderate drinkers, is about 10% lower than non-drinkers. So it just depends what statistic you want to
Wait, wait,
you
wait,
want
wait.
to
Let's
quote.
make sure let double click on that. So you said a moderate drinker has a 10% is 10% more likely to live longer.
Mortality is a number that percentage of your chances of dying next year.
Okay, so drinking actually means
Lower mortality, which is higher life expectancy.
yeah. So and that's probably because maybe the social support. Is that part of it? I mean, one of the things that people really don't actually focus on when it comes to drinking is the communal aspect of it, the connection that comes with it. Would you agree?
At the end of the day, you've been working hard, you've been stressed out. If you drink a glass of wine, it lowers your cortisol levels. Cortisol is a sort of stress hormone. You're lowering your inflammation actually with a little bit of wine. Secondly, people don't realize this, but if you are eating mostly a whole food plant-based diet, a glass of wine with your meal will about quadruple the flavonoid absorption. So a lot of those antioxidants are much better absorbed with a little bit of wine than just drinking water with your meal. We talk about the Mediterranean diet. It is impossible to disentangle wine from the Mediterranean diet.
Impossible is a pretty strong word.
Well, then it's not the Mediterranean diet anymore. The Mediterranean diet, a core pillar of the Mediterranean diet is wine. Whether you show up in Greece, France, Spain, they all drink wine, and it's been part of their tradition for well 3,000 years before Christ. So I don't, it's just this sort of selective, the longevity bros, they find this one study that epidemiologists do, it ends up in a third tier academic journal, and they come out and say, "Oh, alcohol is bad for you. It reduces your white matter in your brain, or you're going to get breast cancer." And it's hyperbole because people click on that. But if you take a sanguine look at the real data, and by the way, most of that mortality is the heavy drinkers. I'm not here at all advocating more than 2 drinks a day for anybody. But most of that cancer, most of the cardiovascular disease, most of the mortality is happening at the 3, 4, 5, 6 drinks a day people. And those are the ones that skew the overall numbers and scare the shit out of us by a glass of wine. But I'm just not going to trade my glass or two of wine a day, almost always with friends. I eat Blue Zone's food with a meal for the if there's a life expectancy bump, it is measured in months, not years.
If you're enjoying the conversations we've been having on the Midlife Chrysalis, I have a valuable offer for you to consider. My book, Learning to Love Midlife, 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age, is a national bestseller. And right now, you can get a copy for just the cost of shipping. It offers stories, research, and practices to help you move from a midlife crisis to a midlife catalyst and see this stage of life not as a decline, but an opportunity to flourish. Claim your copy today at meawisdom.com/midlife book. So let's talk about longevity literacy, because one of the things that's really interesting is if you're, let's say, I'm 65 later this year. What age are you now?
I just turned 65.
Same 1960 baby. So let's say we're both 65 and we see that the average American male lives till 75. So Dan and Chip might think, oh, we only have 10 years left. So there's fallacy in that on 2 levels, maybe actually on 3 levels. Number one is that's the average. And so let's just recognize that you and me are probably healthier than most. We certainly are more privileged and fortunate financially, and we have taken care of our bodies, and we have the money to do things, and we have good health care.
We're
So
better looking.
We're better looking too.
For those
so
of you who can see us on YouTube.
that gets some additional. Secondly, if you've gotten to 65, you already have outlived a lot of people who only live till 35 or 45 or 15 or whatever. So the reality is, I think a 65-year-old actuarially, a male 65-year-old in the US probably will live till early 80s. So it's not 10 years to 75. It might be like 82. You have 17 years. And then, and this is the one that I want to just hear your perspective on, all of that is backward looking. All of that is based upon, that if 75 is the year, is the average for men, that means in 1950, a 1950-year-old guy probably has a 50-50 chance of living till 75. But a 1960 person, like the two of us, 10 years additionally, the longevity curve keeps going up. So the longevity stats are based upon people who have already died. And so it doesn't take into account the increasing longevity. So Professor Conley is lecturing Professor Dan Buettner. Any of those make sense?
No, you're directionally correct. So life expectancy for a newborn today for a male is 74. For a newborn female is about 79 or almost 80. Okay, that's a newborn. But if you manage to make it past infant mortality, the sort of adolescent male testosterone toxicity, and all the other childbirth, et cetera, and make it to 65, your life expectancy at 65 for a healthy guy our age is probably 92 or 93. We should get probably another 25 years out of life. So the longer you lived, the healthier you've been, and the more years you can, relative to the person born today, the more years you're likely to live. It's just like, a life expectancy of a 99-year-old is not 95. So that kind of the extreme example of it. So the value proposition here is about 15 years. If you do everything right, you should be able to hit 94 for a male, about 96 for a female. Right now in the United States, we're mid 70s or upper 70s.
So let's talk about that. The United States 30 years ago was up in the top 2 or 3 in the world when it came to longevity. And then in the last 30 or 40 years, let's say, well, so it has been, it was one of the highest. It's seen the least growth in longevity or life expectancy of any of the developed world, correct? We're 48th in the world today. The US is. So what has the US gotten wrong?
Well, let me just rewind a little bit. So for most of since the time of Christ, life expectancy only went up about a year every 200 years. So a Roman could expect 25 years of life expectancy, and middle-aged Germany, we know this from looking at graveyards, they could expect about 33 years. By 1900, life expectancy for American male was about 40. And from 1850 until about 1990, we were gaining about 2.5 years of life expectancy per decade. So, and that was largely because we beat infectious disease. When vaccinations came along and antibiotics, it used to be if you stepped on a nail and got an infection, you're dead. In World War I, more people died of infections than they did from bullets, and people don't realize how lethal infectious disease, cholera, malaria, dysentery, diarrhea would wipe out 20 or 30% of newborns. And we beat those with vaccinations and with antibiotics. But then what happens in about 1960 or 1970, these food scientists develop processed foods, high fructose corn syrup, some of these not all seed oils are bad. In fact, most of them are good, but some bad seed oils, artificial colorings, artificial dyes, and then also in about 1978 or something like that, we had this big revolution thanks to Nixon's Secretary of Agriculture named Earl Butz. Yeah, Earl Butz. Earl Butz is the one who gave us the factory farm. And we needed that, by the way. I'm not here to badmouth Earl Butz. We didn't have enough calories in 1978 to feed all Americans. But what's happened since then is we've tripled the grain production: soybeans, corn, wheat, sugar beets. And now we got about 4,200 calories sloshing around per American every single day that are being marketed to us, and we only need 22 or 2,300. So there's about twice as many calories as we need. These food companies are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to make a profit, so they take this very cheap input, and they make their food scientists tell their food scientists make it taste delicious. They hire the best minds in Madison Avenue, market to us, and they surround sound our life with snacks, salty snacks, and packaged sweets, and soda pops, and meat sticks, and shit. You can't escape it, and and we're genetically
Is there a
hardwired
product called meat sticks and shit?
There was a time in
Hopefully
my
not,
life I
hopefully
might have
not.
bought something named that, but not today. But well, anyway, the problem is we can't escape these unhealthy calories right now. And at the same time, our life has been taken over by mechanical conveniences. We do about 20% of the non-exercise physical activity of our grandparents, largely because we don't walk anymore. We have machines to do our lawn work and our our kitchen work and our garden work, and then I think the third leg of that stool is social media is replacing face-to-face conversations. And we cannot recognize the importance of social connection when it comes to longevity. We evolved with other human beings, and not on a Zoom call. Even though I like seeing you on Zoom, I'd rather be sitting across a table from you, Chip, right now, and it'd be a better situation for both of us. So we've engineered physical activity out of our lives. We consume about 500 extra calories a day. 70 or 60 or 70% of those calories come from ultra processed food, and it's killing us. It's so after about 1990, life expectancy had thundered up every decade until 1990, and then actually between 1990 and 2010, it plateaued and even went down a little bit. So that's first time in living history. And now, by some estimates, life expectancy of our children will be actually less than our life expectancy because of our food environment, our built environment, and our social environment. Not until we turn those three uh, domains around are we going to see life expectancy starting to rise again.
So Blue Zones has been hired by all kinds of communities across the US and maybe elsewhere to try to actually create the conditions for people to be healthier within their communities. Can you talk about that initiative, Dan? Because this is not just about Dan writing books for individuals. The company that you started and the movement that you started is out there helping people, helping communities, city managers and city council people to say, we want our people to be healthier. And what is it that Blue Zones can do to help a community get healthier?
So the core insight, 20 years of traveling to Blue Zones, those people don't have more discipline than we do. They don't have a better sense of individual responsibility. They don't have better genes than we have. The one advantage they have, and this is the insight that nobody else gets or very few people get, they live in an environment, which in other words, their micro decisions on a moment to moment, day to day basis are slightly better. The cheapest and most accessible foods are mostly peasant food, beans and grains and sweet potatoes and nuts and garden vegetables and greens. They're they don't. It's easier to walk across the village than it is to drive. They've depended on a garden, so they're out there weeding or watering or harvesting vegetables for an hour or so every day. The option to implode into their devices doesn't exist. They're compelled to show up to village events, to church. People live in extended families, so they're always around grandma, the cousins, so there's not loneliness. In 2009, I got a grant from AARP and worked with the University of Minnesota School of Public Health, and we auditioned 5 cities with this idea of manufacturing a blue zone. And we weren't going to come in and tell people to eat their beans and scold them for not getting physical activity. All we were going to do is re-engineer their surroundings so that it was easier to walk places, that healthy food was cheaper, more accessible, and we curbed junk food marketing. We did put some training wheels on for people to help them connect with their neighbors face to face way, to walk together or to eat together. And it's amazing when you help people do that 4 or 5 times, it goes on autopilot. They become friends. And then we gave everybody who wanted it a free purpose workshop. Richard Leider. We're both fans of Richard Leider. Richard Leider helped us with that. And then once they found their purpose, we helped them find a volunteer opportunity. So that was the core of it. And we measured, and remarkably, Albert Lea, Minnesota, 20,000 people. In 2 years, their life expectancy went up by 3 years. They lost about 2 tons off their waistline. We measured this. The University of Minnesota measured this. And the healthcare costs for city workers, which is a significant number of people, dropped by 40%. This was all reported, third party. by Harvard's Walter Willett in Newsweek magazine. After that, 400 other cities said, we want to be a blue zone city. And we've now managed to work in about 70 communities, including Fort Worth, Texas, Naples, Florida, Phoenix, Arizona, Los Angeles. And it works not because we hound or scold people or guilt people because they don't do the right thing. It's because we set them up for success in what they eat, how they move, and how they connect. That company's going strong. It's called Blue Zones LLC.
So there are some of the original five that may have fallen off the wagon, so to speak, are not doing as well as they used to. And there may be some new places in the world that are the burgeoning and emerging blue zones. Tell us a little bit about that. Which places are struggling of the original five, and which are some of the new blue zones?
Well, Okinawa, Japan is no longer a blue zone. Why? Well, largely led by the American base there. There's the whole big island is just one forest of junk food, the KFCs and Burger King, McDonald's, AW. And now the island is crisscrossed with concrete freeways. It's a sad place. And now for people under 60, they're the least healthy prefecture in all of Japan. The older people are still doing the village, old people in villages, they're still living the blue zone way and enjoying the longevity benefits. And then conversely, I'm just finishing a book right now on health span, something called health adjusted life expectancy. I've gotten interested in places around the world where people live the longest lives in full health. So that's without chronic disease and without major disability. Because at the end of the day, people they want their health as much as they want to be living. So we found, I'm not going to tell you where all of them is, but because I revealed it on our Netflix series, Live to 100, Singapore is a very good example of what I'm calling a new blue zone. And people there can expect to live 12 more good years than an average American. Life expectancy, healthy life expectancy for American, by the way, is about 64. A little bit more if you're in Minnesota, a lot less if you're in Appalachia. Singapore, you can expect 76 years in full health. That's the average. And that factors in, people got unlucky and had a heart attack at 20. And the majority of people are in their 80s and they're still doing yoga class and dancing and dating a hot 78-year-old.
And is that because of the Power Nine? I mean, is there anything new about Singapore that's a new variable that you've discovered?
You got to wait for the book.
Okay, all right, that's
But
fair. All right.
the book I
Uh,
have that I will talk about, though, I have a book coming out and it's called Blue Zone One Pot, Blue Zone Kitchen One Pot. And people think, well, that sounds like kind of a lightweight book, but there's a lot of science in it. We did a meta analysis. If you want to know what a centenarian ate to live to 100, you have to know what she ate as a little girl, at middle age, and lately. And we aggregated 155 dietary surveys in all five blue zones over the last 85 years and averaged them. So we know exactly what 100-year-olds ate. And then we took those guidelines and we gave them to a New York Times recipe virtuoso to help us develop recipes. But before we did that, we went to Stanford, worked with an AI lab. We scraped 650,000 recipes from the biggest sites on the internet. I isolated all the recipes with 100 or more five-star reviews. So the recipes we know Americans love, and then we analyzed the flavor patterns, and we found 7 flavor patterns that Americans reliably love, and that was the guide to this whole book. So all the recipes, all 100 recipes, you can cook them in one pot, hence the name Blue Zone Kitchen One Pot. They're all formulated for longevity, and they're all maniacally delicious. They all come from these 7 basically flavor profiles. And by the way, almost all of them take less than a half an hour and cost less than $4 a serving. So I think it's going to be a big hit. By
I
the
think so
way,
too.
every time you go out to eat, you eat about 250 more calories than you would if you ate at home. Those calories are full of saturated fat and sodium. The only way we're going to get America living longer is eating at home again.
Interesting. Well, the restaurant industry is going to actually take revolt against you right now. That's okay. You. Let's talk about your personal, you as a person, as a human. This podcast is called the Midlife Chrysalis, based upon the premise that we want to help people to see that midlife doesn't have to be a crisis; it can be a chrysalis. You are two pieces of data: the Becca Levy data that shows that you get 7.5 years of additional life if you have a positive perspective on aging, and the U curve of happiness suggests that after 50, people get happier on average. Did you have a midlife chrysalis? Did you have a time in your 40s or 50s or 30s, 40s, 50s, maybe even early 60s, in which you went through a lot of transition and it kicked your ass at the time, but on the other side of it, you were a lot wiser and you felt maybe a new sense of, of joie de vivre?
At about 40, I married a very good woman, but we drifted apart and we had a divorce at 40 and it kicked my ass actually. I grew up Catholic and never been a divorce in my family and my family didn't take it very well. And I was under a lot of pressure for 3 or 4 years. I've never been depressed, but I got pretty depressed during that time. Sold one business and all of a sudden was with another company and I didn't really like it there. And I had 3 really tough years. But as you well know, those tough years are usually our best teachers. So during that period, I learned a certain compassion. I learned to look within and really confront the things about my character I didn't love. I went to 10-day silent meditation called Vipassana as part of that process and really learned a lot about, how I mean, tendency is blame everybody else. It's not my fault. But no, some of it was Dan Buettner, and I didn't pay attention to that. And then, I just think you develop some empathy and some compassion when you go through a really tough time. And it was from about age 40 to 42 where I wasn't happy right before I started Blue Zones.
What kind of path are you carving through midlife? Our free Midlife Pathfinder quiz helps you discover which of 8 archetypes best describe your approach to this stage of life and what that means for your next chapter. It only takes a few minutes and your results may surprise you. Find out your archetype now. It's quick, it's fun, and it might help you see your journey in a whole new light. Take the Pathfinder quiz at meawisdom.com/quiz. You've been doing these expeditions and you want to focus on, how to make a happier, healthier world. But what was it exactly that led you to thinking about blue zones as a concept? And what the hell does blue zones? What is blue? Why isn't it red zones, green zones, black zones?
I'll answer both questions. First of all, from about I had a company. That's the company I sold at 40. But I had a company. I had 14 full-time employees, and our job was to solve great mysteries. Why did the Maya civilization disappear? Did Marco Polo go to China? Human origins. We did 15 of these expeditions. We call them quests. And I got very good at reading academic papers. I got very good at research. I got very good at calling top experts and synthesizing lots of primary sources of information and solving mystery. Then I'd take this team of scientists into the field and we'd solve these mysteries. One of the last mysteries was we came across a finding by the World Health Organization in 1999 that Okinawa had the highest disability-free life expectancy in the world. So right there, I said, "Whoa, there's a great mystery. How are these, Southeast Asians living such a long, healthy life?" And I did just a very quick, facile. We called them quests. We were there for maybe 2 weeks, and I just fell in love with that. Older people and the traditions that get them to be old and healthy. It was that one expedition that 3 years later launched the interest in blue zones I got a grant from the National Institutes on Aging and a big assignment from National Geographic to spend 3 years to find these blue zones. Why are they called blue zones and not red zones? Because my colleague, and he's my colleague to this day, Gianni Pass, he's the one who identified the Sardinian blue zone. So one of the 4 blue zones Gianni found in Sardinia, because he was looking at every single municipality, looking for the municipality with the highest percentage of people over age 90. And he marked those little villages with the blue check mark, a blue X. And there was one area in Sardinia, in the highlands, where there were so many blue check marks, it just became a blue blob. And we started referring to it as a blue zone. And if he would have been using a black pen or a red pen, the name would not have been as good.
How interesting. Well, and there's some people who say, oh, it's because most of these places are near the water. And that is not it. That is not it.
Even though there's several on an island, they're always inland. They're always inland. Why are they inland? Because pirates, until the sort of late 19th century, it was too dangerous to live by the sea. You'd be pillaged constantly. So they all live inland, and they're mostly pastoral, agricultural people. They don't rely on seafood in any of the blue zones, believe it or not. Very little fish in the blue zones.
10 years from now, Dan, what will you regret if you don't learn it or do it now?
5 years ago, I backed off on doing the city work, working with cities.
But Blue Zones LLC is still doing that. You backed off yourself.
Correct. I know that these blue zone projects, as measured by Gallup, save literally million or generate millions of life years. In other words, in a city, I can lower the life expectancy. I mean, raise the life expectancy by 2 or 3 years, and that means in a city of 1 million people is probably another 250,000 years I've given that population of healthy life. I can't think of anything that I could personally do that'd be a greater contribution than jump back in and work with cities. And our approach, we actually don't get hired by the city. We get hired by insurance companies and hospital systems to lower the disease load, and then we're paid from the savings that we produce. But this involves working with city government to adopt policies that favor healthy food over junk food, favor the pedestrian over the motorist, to favor the non-smoker over the smoker. It involves certifying restaurants, grocery stores, workplaces, schools, and churches who change their designs and policies to favor healthy defaults. And then we can usually get 5 or 10% of the population to become a blue zone ambassador and optimize their own environment. But this is all an environmental approach. It's not trying to get people to, become vegans or to, become weightlifters. It's just engineering people's unconscious decisions. And I think to answer your question, I would probably regret if I just, enjoyed myself, which I do, and not continue to contribute this hard won knowledge that I've gained. And that's a long answer to a very simple question.
So a couple years ago, maybe even 3, I don't even remember, but you and I co-led a workshop at MEA in Baja. What was your experience of MEA? What did you come away from your time at our Baja campus?
Okay, so I met you and deeply admired you. I know your whole story. I know your listeners know your story. I know you're an incredibly good guy. I thought the MEA would be this sort of facile, rah-rah week, but I wanted to go to Baja and I wanted to hang out with you. And I was floored. I came as a teacher or faculty, whatever you call us. And for 2 hours a day, I gave Blue Zones happiness and longevity content. But then I got sucked into the whole curriculum, this sort of hero's journey to figure out the next chapter. And I freaking loved it. And it was a huge part of the reason I just answered the last question and get back into helping blue zone cities is because of my experience there. And it particularly, you couple us off at a certain point to help you kind of map your journey. And I ended up with this 85-year-old guy named Jim Flaherty. He's a tall guy. He wore sports jackets with the sleeves rolled up, and he had round glasses, and he sort of played with floaties in the pool, and I thought it's kind of an odd guy. But when you got to know him, one of the nicest guys, writing a screenplay, writing a movie, writing another book, and he's well off. I said, Jim, why don't you like stop and enjoy life? And he said these words, which have transformed me. He said, at a certain point, I realized that work is more fun than fun. And boy, a light went off, and I realized, God, I actually really do love this Blue Zones work. I love making a difference in people's lives. And I kind of went back at it. And it was, that inspiration. I then did the
The Netflix
Netflix Live the
Netflix. So, yeah,
100.
I want some royalties from your Netflix series,
You deserve
because
it.
we were the inspiration for it, I think.
I'll tell you what, that documentary series won 3 Emmy Awards. And you know what my royalties are for that? 0. 0. So I'll split them 50-50 with. In fact, I'll give you 100% of my royalties. But the other thing it did do, and maybe I should split some with you here. I started the Blue Zone Kitchen frozen meal right after that, and with the idea of formulating for longevity with maniacal deliciousness. And I'm proud to announce they're in 3,000 stores, including all Whole Foods, and it's the best-selling plant-based frozen food in America. And that started about 4 months after going to MEA. So those of you considering a life change and want to figure out your next chapter, MEA is your answer.
Oh my God. Well, I have one last question. Let's say a young buck was coming along and saying to you, can I have some coffee or tea with you next week, Dan? I would love to sit down with you and tap into your wisdom. Could you come to our little, time together with one bumper sticker of wisdom that you've learned along the way? And what's the origin story of it? So this is a bumper sticker with your fingerprints all over it.
Do what you love, and don't get derailed from that. I guess Joseph Campbell has a variety that has follow your bliss, but I don't know. I've always done. I know you want it in a. Here's the bumper sticker. There's 4 things: have something to do, have someone to love, have something to look forward to, and have something to give back. I think those are the 4 legs of a successful life, right
Did you
there.
just come up with that?
It's a variation of what I've heard from other people.
Oh
But,
yeah.
I synthesize everything, but I don't think anybody's ever put it like that. But, those 4 things cover pretty much a human happiness. And remember I said have something to give back. The origin is I tried working for somebody once in my life and kinda hated it, and every time I got really interested in something and I just went after that, and I kinda slouch into things. I'm not a gung ho, get pumped about that. I just sort of get interested and start spending time, build a social network around it. And I don't chase money. I'm aware of it. Money's a byproduct. This is my house. I live in this fancy ass house here on a lake in Wisconsin. I've been successful, but it's a byproduct of how can my work produce something that help other people live a better life? If you can answer that, money's going to come. Like you have. You're successful. You've done the same thing. You don't chase money, I don't think, Chip. I've seen you in action. I've seen you at MEA. You're there every day, and you have these, people who from all walks of life, and they're, you have some. I know some amazing teachers, Pico Iyer, and people I just worship. But a lot of people there are regular folks, and I watch you, and you pay attention to everybody, and you're proud of everybody. You have time for it. You're the big deal there. You're the guru, but you don't act like you're better than anybody else. And I really admire that about you.
Part of wisdom is about humility, and as my friend Richard Rohr, the famous writer, a Christian mystic, and MEA faculty says, "A humiliation a day, hopefully mild." Um, I hope this has not been a humiliating experience for you, Dan. Thank you for joining us on the Midlife Chrysalis. I love you. Hope to see you soon.
I love you back, Chip. It's an honor to be with you, and I MEA. I think it should be institutionalized for anybody hitting age 50. And thank you for that this gift.
Listen, on that point, I think we need a rite of passage at 50 in the United States and a way for the people to save for their 50th birthday when they get to take off a month, a year, gap year, whatever. And midlife wisdom schools like MEA are all over the map. So that's our future.
It wouldn't sound weird if you say, an 18-year-old should go to high school, or a 22-year-old should go to college and graduate from college. We need this 50-year milestone. Our happiest and our wisest years are beyond 50. You should have a plan for those. And I don't know of any other methodical, better plan than MEA. So I'm just a huge fan. You're not paying me anything to say this. I mean it because I've experienced it. So keep up the good work. And I love you, brother. And
Love you too. Thank you. Well, that was fun. Dan is one of those people I like to party with, which is probably number one on the list of what I learned from that is Dan, of the power nine variables for people who live a long time, the thing he is least good at is faith communities. The things he's maybe best at is drinking wine every day, not a lot. So he is a fun guy to party with. I will admit that. It is interesting. And it was, I enjoyed his pushback on this topic of alcohol. And I think he made a good point, which is we don't differentiate between alcohol. When someone says, your doctor says to you, how many glasses of alcohol do you have a day on an average day or per week? They don't say, is it red wine? Is it a scotch on the rocks? What kind of alcohol is it? And is it full of sugar, et cetera? So let's start with the fact that, Dan is a sinner. He likes to have a good life. And I think he's really a good example of someone who does live a joie de vivre experience. Secondly, he was not living a good life at age 40. So he had his sort of midlife chrysalis early. He sold a business, and at age 40, he was getting divorced. He didn't have the purpose he used to have. He was now working for the company that he'd sold the business to, and he hates working for other people. And so he struggled. He went into a depression. And my sense is, I didn't know him back then, but he was probably in a place where he didn't know what was next. But the beautiful thing about it is this Blue Zones concept came out of that. This idea of, who are the people in the world who lived the longest? And it was soon after that, about 3 years later, that he started exploring the Blue Zones as a concept. So it's just a good example of the fact that sometimes at your lowest point in midlife, you don't know what's on the other side. There may be a butterfly ready to fly out of the chrysalis. And then thirdly, his data he's a data hound, and a lot of people don't know that about him. But he's a bit of a geek, and this is why he and I get along so well. I am a geek as well. The fact that we are only physically active 20% as much as our grandparents is a remarkable statistic I'd never heard before. And so part of the reason the US has such a troubled relationship with longevity today is because we spend a lot of time in our cars, a lot of time on the couch. We eat bad processed foods. We eat at fast food restaurants, which is part of the reason why Okinawa is no longer a blue zone. And in fact, it's sort of our form of an infectious disease. American fast food companies going over to a foreign country and infecting them with unhealthy foods. So if I could take one thing away from this whole episode, it's that you don't need to go to meet some biohacking bro who's going to tell you to do a cold plunge and then stem cell regeneration and then, fasting, for days at a time. You don't have to be Brian Johnson down into Venice, who, seems like he's using his body as a laboratory, which is not a bad thing to do, but he's, it also doesn't seem like he's the happiest guy in the world from the podcast episodes I've heard. Frankly, the people who tend to live long are happier. They tend to be very social, and they tend to live in the way that our ancestors have lived, which is to actually be on the land, moving naturally, and eating healthy kinds of foods. So I hope you will do that for the next week until our next episode in a week. Wishing you all the best.
Thanks for listening to the Midlife Chrysalis. This show is produced by Midlife Media. If you enjoyed this episode, help us spread the word by subscribing and leaving a review on your favorite platform.